It's a great pleasure for me to introduce our next speaker, Paul Dabbar, who very recently was conferred by the U.S. Senate as Deputy Secretary for the U.S. Department of Commerce at the end of June of this year, I believe. Paul is somebody that we've come to know very well over the last few years with a remarkably rich background. I'm rich meaning interesting. Although, well, okay. So prior to his confirmation, he was also the president and CEO of Bohr Quantum Technology, a really fantastic startup company in the field. And before that, he served as the U.S. Department of Energy's fourth Undersecretary for Science. He has a remarkably interesting and broad background, but one of the things that struck out to me, it was that he's one of the few people that's been to both the North and South Pole. Yeah, how many people here have been to both the North and South Pole? How many people have been to either pole? 3.
It's you, Chicago. There's a few people here in the South Pole.
Yeah, and some we've left there. Too much? No, okay. But before, of course, this career, he did serve as a nuclear submarine officer in California. And really, we're very lucky to have somebody with such a broad set of experiences in the public sector, the private sector. And today we'll hear some of his thoughts. Paul, thank you for joining us.
All right. Well, it's great to be here. I guess this conference is so big that the new Rubenstein Center at the University of Chicago wasn't big enough, which certainly looks like it, given this. Well, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here with you at this year's event. Bigger, David, than ever before, it looks like, is my best guess. Obviously, the Midwest and this area stands as a global leader in quantum. The Chicago Quantum Exchange that was started when I was undersecretary is a key part of that. 2 of the premier DOE centers, the National Labs, Argonne and Fermilab, are here. And of course, in the region, there's a number of the world's leading universities, especially in this area. During the president's first administration, when the National Quantum Initiative was triggered, in part by the National Photonic Initiative that David and many other people who were a part of when we got the bill passed through, the national labs here, Argonne and Fermi, each won one of the NQI centers. That's 2 out of 5. I had someone here in town after we announced that say, well, that's great that we got 2 out of 5. Why didn't we win all 5? Was a comment by someone prominent in this community here. Under President Trump and Secretary Lutnick, the Commerce Department is fully aligned and behind the goal that the United States remains the world's leader in quantum technologies. Secretary Lutnick has made it very clear that America's strength in quantum depends not only in scientific excellence, but in our ability to commercialize and innovate and secure supply chains and maintain trusted global partnerships. For those of you who may have seen in the negotiated, for example, in that last point, this last week, Secretary Lutnick, as he highlighted the South Korea trade transaction, that he mentioned quantum in the list of technologies associated with that great partner of ours just this last week. Under President Trump's leadership, the National Quantum Initiative Act was signed. Thank you for all of you who participated in testifying before that. I testified before the Senate on that in 2018. I think we all successfully confused everyone at the Senate committee hearing, which was excellent. And then we got a bipartisan 100% vote out of that, both at the committee and at the full Senate. The bill elevated quantum to a national priority by the president's first administration, authorizing billions of dollars over 5 years, not only from the Department of Energy that I was honored to be a part of, but also by the National Science Foundation and by NIST, which now I am honored to be working with. It established a National Quantum Coordination Office, launched several multi-agency research centers, and accelerated workforce development, laying the foundation for U.S. leadership in all the quantum technologies. In addition, one of the core things that we focused on was effectively crowding in support, not only from the federal funding, but from others who want to participate. This would not have been the number of people at the conference in 2018. I think, is that fair, David? And so just by my count, in the private sector, in the 2 years after the bill was passed, $6 billion of private sector investment arrived between 2018 and 2020. And that doesn't count all the different university efforts standing up various new programs in PhDs and masters in quantum that happened immediately after the passage of that bill. Now with President Trump back in office, that momentum has returned. Let me go through a few of the points that have happened here in the last few months. Earlier this year, the president came out promptly upon returning to his office on technology leadership focus. He issued a public guidance letter to Director of the Office of Science and Technology Policy, Michael Kratsios, on what areas of S&T he wanted his administration to focus on. It included AI, microelectronics, and quantum, amongst other areas, just like in his first administration. As you know, in the last 4 years, almost no new quantum programs were introduced beyond the excellent DARPA program. After the president's direct memorandum, OMB issued a public guidance letter on budget support for S&T and again, in conjunction with consistent with the first administration, he highlighted support for quantum in the budget strategy going forward. So now we have the president's direction to the administration and budget. So we got policy and we got budget aligned on us going forward. Renewed focus on quantum sits squarely within the president's gold standard science executive order, a landmark directive that reaffirms America's commitment to scientific integrity, transparency, and excellence across all federal research. The order led by the White House ensures that the work of every federal scientist is replicable, data-driven, open to scrutiny, and setting global benchmark for research rigor. The same commitment extends across emerging technologies. The President's AI Action Plan, aligning artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and advanced manufacturing into one coherent national strategy, together with these initiatives, represents a unified technology policy designed to strengthen U.S. innovation, workforce development, economic competitiveness, and safeguarding our values and national security. The President's framework also directs agencies to integrate the AI Action Plan and quantum commercialization roadmap, ensuring that breakthroughs in quantum and AI reinforce each other. These are not separate silos. They are mutually enabling technologies that together will define the next industrial area. The Department of Commerce has played a central role in quantum technology since the early days of this ecosystem. At the department, the core is NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, a global leader in advancing quantum technology, solving measurement challenges, setting the technical and policy foundations for U.S. leadership. Former NIST scientists, many of which are here today, now populate nearly every major U.S. quantum company and have founded several startups showcasing American-developed quantum-enabled products. Many here who have the backgrounds in NIST, Colorado in particular, I've met with a number of the companies who are headquartered there over the last many months again, from my past history, but also here today. And as many of you know, this year's Nobel Prize winner in physics, John Martinez, started at NIST. The International Trade Administration at Commerce and the Bureau of Industry and Analysis lead trade and global commercialization competitiveness aspects for the department and integrate quantum into our trade negotiations. As many of you have seen, we recently entered into a science and technology agreement with the United Kingdom, who also has an excellent interaction with development of quantum technologies around coordination of S&T policy and investment with the United Kingdom. We certainly expect additional engagement with the international sector with our allies on this important technology. Several other efforts on investment and security analysis, protecting ITA, our main trade bureau at the department, protects U.S. quantum leadership through inbound and outbound investment, promoting U.S. industry leadership, promoting U.S. quantum technologies and domestic investment in the global marketplace. We have an effort in supply chain analysis, evaluating all the different components, many of which are represented by people here from various companies that are relevant with enabling technologies such as lasers, cryogenics, and algorithm development. Also, the industry and government coordination, as I was making reference to the UK agreement, which we just signed, engaging with the private sector to understand its objectives and challenges, bringing to the point on both intra-commerce conversations between NIST, ITA on trade, and BIS on security of technology, and also with interagency, in which our engagement with entities such as OMB, so on budget and money, very important, with OSTP at the White House, the Department of Energy, and my friends there, we get together very regularly and mapping out things that we see going forward for the country. Yet, as with every transformative technology, opportunity brings risk. Quantum technology will have national security use cases. NIST and the Department of Commerce have both the expertise and the foresight to meet this challenge. Through rigorous expert-driven process, NIST is leading the development of post-quantum cryptography standards, of which the first round has gone final about 9 months ago. And we will be looking at implementation of that and encouraging the private sector while we continue to look at further layers associated with post-quantum crypto standards to enhance security for the quantum age. Under the leadership of Secretary Lutnick, we have brought back the CHIPS Research and Development Office back in-house. That is approximately $10 billion of R&D money for next-generation technologies under the CHIPS and Science Act. CRDO has released a new broad agency announcement, which many of you have seen, that for the first time explicitly enables quantum technologies to compete for the funding. This was a major milestone. Previously, the program was inaccessible to the quantum industry. Now, thanks to Secretary Lutnick's leadership, the department's strategic coordination with the White House, renewed focus for this critical and emerging technology, the BAA opens up a critical pathway for quantum innovation and support from the Department of Commerce, bridging the gap between research and development and accelerating the next wave of quantum advancement with first advantaged and useful devices and systems. For those of you whose companies have already submitted proposals through our portal and started conversations with our team, thank you. And we look forward to reviewing your submissions. Others who may be interested should take a look at submitting. I'm certain we're going to have a wave after that statement. Let's see if we have enough staff for that. Once again, it's an honor to be back here in Chicago, the beating heart of America's quantum research and development, and to join you all in advancing U.S. technology leadership in this on the next stage. Thank you.
Where do you see the renewal of the National Quantum Initiative fitting into things and the status?
Yeah, so I believe Congress will move forward and pass that bill. I testified on it at the House Science Committee in the last Congress. I believe it will have broad support. It kind of got stuck. It's important for an administration to care about legislation in order to get it passed. I've spent a lot of time dealing with Congress on bills. And while it is certainly not controversial and widely supported across Congress, I believe it didn't move forward in the last administration because, in the last Congress, because there wasn't active support on behalf of the administration. I could say that that all the different agencies represented in the draft have given their comments and feedback to the draft. There's various members who've proposed different amendments, and expect that I think there's a very good chance whatever they pass will probably be supported. We'll wait to see that process, but we're encouraging Congress to take action.
Thanks for taking the question. Just real quickly, there was a Wall Street Journal article, like October 23rd, were they conflating some of what you just announced there, where they were talking about maybe the government taking direct stakes in some quantum companies?
Yeah, so I think it's quite public that we brought the chips R&D effort back in house, and we were open for business. I think that was quite clear. That was quite public. So that's not new news, but that's what they put in the news article. People are submitting things to us. And whether it's lithography or logic or memory or quantum topics, we're kind of a price taker, to use an economic term. People are submitting stuff to us. And of course, people are submitting things to us across the spectrum. And so that was accurate. I won't comment to the rest of it, but we are actively looking at things. The BAA is also quite explicit. As you've seen in this administration, the president's second administration, we're looking at the impact of the shareholder, of a shareholder potential of any sort of investment or action, that the taxpayer should participate in it. And you saw that today within Vulcan Elements. You saw that last week with Westinghouse. You saw that previously with Mountain Pass. You saw that with Intel. And I think everything that we've done, I think the parties who asked us to participate and we decided to participate, that it was very positive for them, including this morning. And so that was in the BAA, so just nothing particularly new in that, other than, it's you can see it by both our action and written down in the BAA.
Well, not only do we have an historic group here in terms of volume, but we also have a significant amount of people that are on the web actually with us as well. Gregory's got a question from one of our web people.
Yeah, so we have a question submitted by Warren Ragland. Warren asks, the EAR's emerging technology framework has understandably prioritized AI and semiconductor innovation in recent years. Could you share the department's plans to refine or expand export controls specific to quantum and quantum-enabling applications, sensing, navigation, post-quantum and cryptography, etc., as capabilities mature commercially?
Yeah, so export controls is an important aspect of commerce across all sorts of different things, certainly mostly in the tech stack. So you see us very active in those topics, certainly in classical microelectronic space. I think over the course of time, we need to be very thoughtful, just like we are with the very high end, especially microelectronics, that quantum is just a different version of that and is at the front end. And of course, as we are thoughtful with all types, quantum will of course be looked at from an export topic and individual technologies. So I think that's generally within the same framework as GPUs and memory and other things that we have that we review.
I'm Warren Ragland. That was actually my question, so I guess I'll ask a different one. So I work in export control, right? I guess I'll ask, how do you advise someone like me to network and support with these companies to make sure they know about export compliance and import compliance, and what to look out for as becoming a quantum leader and quantum capital in the Midwest?
Yeah, so, well, export controls is part of a a process that is done from a technical point of view by the Commerce Department, by BIS, the bureau associated with that, and then ultimately, gets brought up to the president, the White House, about what to go do. We certainly take input on that, but ultimately, at the end of the day, that's a process that's done kind of internally. So there's not a lot of what I would call specific communication about an export control. There's a lot of debate. We catch a lot of interest on that topic across the tech stack. But I think at the end of the day, like a lot of what we see with classical, like semiconductors, working with allies is very different than working with people who are not our active allies. So I think as you think about what countries and which projects, so we get a lot of kind of comments about building a data center in this country or that country with this version of NVIDIA or that version of AMD or elsewhere, and it's something that's evaluated kind of country by country and technology by technology, but certainly ones that are allied nations, such as I was making reference to the UK S&T agreement, is much more obvious on that point than with certain other countries, as we try to show some judgment on that.
We have a second question online from Michael Semenson. Michael asks, with the current administration's reallocations and research funding, what is the plan to stay at the forefront of this technology so that we do not fall behind competitive nations such as China?
Yeah, so I think it's quite clear that with signaling of moving the 10 billion from the Chips and Science R&D effort from zero to more than zero, and we'll see how much of that 10 billion goes to quantum, but that's an infinite jump. But it's certainly, we have lots of dialogue with the quantum sector since we did that all of about 6 weeks ago. So I think that's one point, which is a clear signal around allocation. And to be a bit repetitive, I mean, the president's direction to the administration from his tech memo, and then OMB saying we're supporting it from a monetary point of view. I think if you add that all up together, that there is absolutely, I think, all the right, not just signaling, but I can see from my point of view the reality of capital allocation, and then we'll see what happens with the NQI. We had a question, about that. When the NQI was passed, once again, thank you to David for front running the idea before those of us came along and continued to push it. So thank you for that again. That when we did pass the NQI, not only did we pass the authorization legislation to allow for it, we ended up getting full funding on top of everything else that Congress passed from an appropriation point of view. I have no idea what's going to happen with Congress should they hopefully pass the Reauthorization Act. But those, that's another potential area on top of what we're seeing. I will make a non-quantum topic just to show significant initiative on the part of the president and my old organization at the Department of Energy. In the last administration, they announced one new supercomputer at NERSC in 4 years, the Dowden machine at Berkeley. This last week, hear me on this one. Last week, they announced 7. Okay, so I think if you think about initiative with this administration in compute, of which quantum is kind of a part of that, and there's 2 right here. So Paul, congratulations on winning that here at Argonne National Lab. So 7 happened last week, and I think it's probably, I expect there may be more in the compute space, whether it's quantum or other things. I will make a general comment about where I see where things are going in terms of classical or quantum topics. As we engage with CRDO, we ask for aspirational points. And we've seen the development cycle of microelectronics radically pick up from when I was undersecretary. And what we saw last time was a generation over generation machine, I don't know, 5 years, Paul, give or take. And the jump was 5 to 7 times, give or take, performance gain. Now we're seeing companies develop new microelectronics chips annually and at much higher jumps in performance than before. So the innovation cycle that we're seeing across the microelectronics space is far more aspirational is not the right word. The achievement of what we're seeing from what's happening both in the classical space and in the quantum space, because we're having conversations about what could be achieved. And I think there's been a lot of work in the last 4 years. There may not have been a lot of support in the last 4 years beyond the Dabbar program, but people were working behind the scenes in this room. I don't have to tell people in this room that you were working on this for the last 4 years. And when we ask what's possible to do in the next year, 2, 3, I think everyone should be really positive about what this system has generated in the last few years, kind of waiting for the next support wave that the president has come back and directed us to go do.
So back on the NQI authorization, I believe there was discussion and support for 2 or 3 national centers to be formed a NIST. What is your opinion on that? How would those centers differ from the existing, let's say, DOE centers? How would they complement and strengthen the ecosystem? And maybe in general, your take on the NQI reauthorization. What are we doing right now that is good, and what should we add that we are potentially missing?
Yeah, so, as I think about basically the 5 areas of tech right across quantum. So we got computing, networking, sensing, fab and foundries, which I haven't mentioned yet, and post-quantum crypto. So those are kind of the big 5. And I think different and kind of embedded in those technologies are things like workforce and so on that are a part of that. I think trying to figure out which part of NSF, which part of DOE, which part at NIST, which part of how we all kind of fit together, and how do we make certain we don't kind of overlap efforts that is better to collaborate on. You'll hear from Dario Gil tomorrow morning. You could probably guess that we are in not just constant contact, but we're constantly together on different aspects, but including in quantum. So I think we're very much aligned around that. And I talked to Brian Stone at NSF also, and given the president's focus, the dollars that are available, whether a DOE, NIST, and the R&D program, CHIPS R&D program, or other dollars, and NSF and workforce and some of the things that they were doing previously. I think with that alignment with the president's direction and our kind of constant level of dialogue, I think we'll figure out which of those areas and what we should be doing, just like we did last time. I think there was not a I think when I was doing that at DOE last time, at least my perception, I could be wrong if you all think differently, but I think the efforts of funding and support that NSF did versus what NIST did, or what DOE did, I think there was no wasted money in efforts because of the dialogue that I think went well.
Well, thank you very much. Let's give Paul a hand.